Bomb King is notorious for saying, "You may be my jester," in one of his voice lines. And apparently, this weekend, every pro player was. This LAN, the Masters LAN that just completed here over April 7th to April 9th, was a fantastic showcase of the best teams from around the world playing high-level competitive esports for Paladins. And it was also a showcase of the #1 champion in the game by far, which is Bomb King. Now, you may not care about esports, you may not even care about Paladins, but it is an interesting thought and I think discussion opportunity here on the channel to think about how to counteract OP champions that clearly are above and beyond the rest of their competition, and how to go about either playing with them or playing against them. I also do want to let everyone know that the nerfs for Bomb King are already in effect in this current patch in OB47 in Paladins, and that OB46, the patch where he was first lag compensated, was the actual patch the pros had to play on. We do this as a result of the fact that we don't want to have them playing on a brand new patch that's only been released for 3 days. However, this did mean that Bomb King was in the strongest state he has ever been and probably will ever be in his entire history of the game. But before we go any further, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Raynday Gaming. My name is Raynday, and thanks so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, whatever you're going to do at the end of this video or right now, and I appreciate you all tuning in. Bomb King, while previously a champion that only the highest and best skilled, most experienced players with that champion could perform on, now became an all-around asset to anyone looking to win a game. The lag compensation made it easier and much more efficient to hit your bombs and land them in the correct spaces, and that just meant that his damage was so much more reliable, and that even Joe Schmo could have a good game with Bomb King every now and then, whereas it usually had to be a pro. And you know what this did? This put Bomb King into groupthink. This put Bomb King into the hands of the pros with the ability to practice him and be effective on him and work him into their strategies and get players who were comfortable and ready to go bring him into a LAN environment. Prior to that, Bomb King would have been able to perform just the same on a LAN environment because you're not really having to worry about things like lag compensation and ping. It's just the best it can be. You guys are basically playing right next to each other. You don't have to worry about going back and forth all these long distances between servers and stuff. But the ability for pros to then take a few weeks and practice this Bomb King, to see the implications, to work on it in scrims when they are in an online environment and see the actual effects, meant that they could bring this into LAN and be that much more effective. You can't ask somebody to play an OP champion that whenever they pick them up in their normal performance while they're trying to practice with their team heading into that LAN, they have a bad game or he's unreliable. Bomb King went from that unreliable but high potential champion to a very reliable, very high potential champion as a result of this change, and allowed him to become a huge part of the LAN scene. So now we get into the meat and gravy of the video. How to counter Bomb King. Most teams thought about this, and really the only answer, the easiest, most available answer, which most people will go to first, was that we have to first pick him. And that just meant winning a coin toss. That first answer that they were looking for, which is have Bomb King on my team, that's the only way to counter him, really resulted in a little bit of luck going to their side, or some seeding that they didn't have any control over at this point. And that's a legitimate strategy. I mean, if there's a character that's really good in the game, you having them on your team can do wonders for your success. But it is something I'd be wary of, especially considering the fact that not every game, if you keep winning or losing, depending on how the picks go, will land you with that champion. And so, although it may work one time, it's not going to work all the time, and ultimately, you may not control your fate as much as you would like. Now, the groupthink around this was that the first person to get Bomb King wins the series. And of course, that was actually how the first day transpired, because that was how everyone was thinking. There wasn't enough time to try new strategies that you hadn't been practicing beforehand and brought to LAN. Everyone was prepared to try and get Bomb King and win those games, but they weren't really prepared on how to deal with them. Burrito, or formerly Burrito, currently Carbon 6, and then probably not after this LAN, found out that Makoa Shaolin was a very good answer for them. They've got Bonker, one of the best Shaolins in the world, and Makoa, Theo, one of the best tanks in the world. Those two comfort picks also allowing the opportunity to not only CC Bomb King, but burst him down very quickly and set him up to take additional burst from their teammates. And though Makoa Shaolin worked sometimes, it wasn't the consistent end-all be-all answer for a great Bomb King player. And in fact, they had to go up against one of the better Bomb Kings I have ever seen, named Diggy Dog. He was part of the OCE, the Australian team, which is a fantastic team in the Paladins community, Kanga Esports. They've just made it to the semifinals semifinals, been one of the highest and most loved to be watched competitors in our scene ever since they showed up, and they showed that Bomb King, when played at his highest level, is nearly unstoppable by any composition that you throw at him. Or so we thought. As day number 2 progressed, Astral Authority, the North American first seed, actually ended up putting out some strategies that had not been seen in LAN by actually bringing 2 tanks into the game, and one of them being a tank that had largely fallen out of favor, Ruckus. Ruckus is notorious for actually being one of those tanks that goes in and out of being very strong or very weak depending on the meta, and he's not really gotten any changes to his kit for whenever he's had success at LAN or when he's not had success. Though initially the European wildcard WASD Sports upset Astral Authority, taking them down 3-1, Astral Authority was able to climb back through the losers bracket, face WASD again, and win that series, many thanks to their Ruckus, Makoa, and Drogos play. Now this leads me to number 2 and eventually number 3 of how to counter OP champions. Number 2 really being Astral Authority's willingness to change the meta. When you think of an OP champion, what are you really saying when that champion is overpowered? You're saying they're overpowered based on the situation that they are in. Think of somebody who has thousands and thousands, maybe millions and millions of dollars, and they're in a big business meeting about who is going to bid the certain amount of money needed to purchase a fancy car. That person is going to be at the most powerful because they have the most money. They have the asset needed to be successful in this specific scenario. Well, what happens if you change the scenario? What if the Wall Street banker no longer needs money to get that car, but just has to win a foot race against every other CEO in the room? Well, maybe that means he's now at a disadvantage because there's someone who's a lot sprier, a lot faster, and maybe a lot younger than he is, and he's not going to be at an advantage. See, having the right assets means you have the right assets for the situation, and what Astral Authority did was they said, that's great, but we will change the situation here. You may have this extra damage over us and a great blaster, but we'll take a good blaster and we will have more power and pressure on the point with our damage from Ruckus and our ability to actually impact the game and change the pace. Largely, this was successful and gave them the edge over WASD and actually allowed them to beat the Bomb King and move on into the semifinals. And that's what teams started to do. Largely, day 2 was just a representation of teams who were willing to adapt, having success, and teams who weren't willing to adapt, getting knocked out. It was a very, very cool situation to see, as myself, Hi-Res Pretty Hair, all of the other casters as well, really put out on our Twitters and through our communications through cast that the team that was going to win this LAN was not going to be the team that had the best Bomb King, it was going to be the team that knew how to beat Bomb King. So again, to reiterate, this is how metas shift, this is why champions become really good or really bad. In Smite or Paladins or any other specific games, you see the scenarios actually shift and suddenly the person who had the advantage no longer has it and somebody else has the advantage, and maybe they're OP for a while. So in a LAN environment or in your games, changing the basic dynamic in which you know that champion has an advantage will give you an advantage in maybe countering them and throwing off some of their assets to succeed in that scenario. Lastly, but not least, and I think maybe in the most fun way, the best and probably most exciting way to counter an OP champion is to be excellent and just masterclass at another champion who's almost just as good. It's hard to talk about Drogos in the Paladins competitive scene without mentioning Bugsy, D69's captain and eventual winner of the LAN, because he is synonymous with one of the best champions and playing them at one of the highest, if not the highest level that we've seen. And here's where the edge came through, especially for D69 at the very end of the day. They were able to beat Bomb King 3 times in a row thanks to Bugsy and his Drogos, Elven Path and his Makoa, Sheepa and whatever character he played, Purdo and his unbelievable aim, and of course Jera and his healing skills and those noodles coming out of nowhere. This team was firing on all cylinders, but largely I think it was also a fact of having a blaster played at such a high level that he would compete and he would often beat the impact that Bomb King was having in the game. Bomb King's the flavor of the month, but he hasn't been a staple of the Paladins competitive meta, and he hasn't been a big part of any of our other LANs. Bugsy's been playing the Drogos at this level for over a year, at every single LAN that he's been able to attend, and he just knows the ins and outs of what to do and how to do it. Give me a masterclass bro on his favorite champion and give me the flavor of the month on someone who's just practiced it for this tournament. I'll take that masterclass pro 9 times out of 10 to win these games. And they won 4 out of 5. They went and took the best of 7 set really cleanly against Carbon 6, and we're going to go ahead and make things happen without the Bomb King in 3 of their 4 games. At the end of the day, the moral of the story is that innovation, willingness to be different and to try new things, masterclass play, and practice were the determining factors of who became the king at this last LAN. And hopefully we all remember that moving forward in the competitive scene and in your own games, that even though you're faced with a tough task or a very good champion that hasn't been tuned correctly yet, doesn't mean that you can't win and that there aren't avenues for you and your players on your team to succeed. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know your thoughts about how to counter OP champions, what you thought about the Bomb King LAN this weekend, and D69's incredible play, and just your general thoughts about this video in the comment section below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, remember to never give up, never stop gaming, and I'll see you all next time.